Two security guards grabbed decorated trauma nurse Commander Elena Vasquez by the arm and ordered her to leave her own son's graduation ceremony right there in front of 500 witnesses. Her ticket was valid. Her seat was reserved. Her son was about to give the valedictorian speech. But they didn't care. They saw her face, made their judgment, and decided she didn't belong in the VIP section. 30 seconds later, 10 Navy SEALs rose silently from their seats across the gymnasium. The room went dead quiet. Every phone stopped moving. Every conversation died mid-sentence. The guards' faces went white, because the woman they were trying to remove had once pulled each of those men from burning wreckage under enemy fire. And now those warriors were about to remind everyone in that room what real power looks like. Before we dive into this unbelievable story, I want to invite you to stick with me until the very end. If this story moves you, please hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel around the world. The gymnasium of Pinehurst Academy in Ashford Heights, North Carolina, smelled like floor wax and anticipation. Rows of folding chairs stretched across the polished hardwood, packed with parents clutching cameras and grandparents fanning themselves with graduation programs. Banners hung from the rafters congratulating the class of 2024. Outside, the June heat pressed against the windows, but inside the air conditioning hummed and the energy buzzed with that specific mix of pride and impatience that comes with high school graduations. Commander Elena Vasquez sat in the third row of the VIP section, her posture straight, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She wore her navy dress whites, crisp, immaculate, every crease sharp enough to cut. Ribbons lined her chest in precise rows, the Bronze Star with Valor, the Purple Heart, the Navy Commendation Medal, the Combat Medical Badge. 16 years of service, 4 deployments, 3 field hospitals, more lives saved than she could count. Her son, Marcus Vasquez, was somewhere backstage right now, probably adjusting his honor cords for the 10th time and mentally rehearsing his valedictorian speech. She hadn't seen him yet this morning. He'd left early for final preparations, kissed her on the cheek, told her he'd see her from the stage. She'd smiled and straightened his tie even though it was already perfect. Elena checked her watch. 10 minutes until the ceremony began. She glanced down at her ticket again, even though she'd already verified it 3 times. Section A, Row 3, Seat 7. Reserved seating for families of honor graduates. Everything was in order. Around her, other VIP guests chatted quietly. A school board member 2 seats down was scrolling through his phone. A local business owner who'd donated the new science lab was laughing with the athletic director. Everyone belonged, everyone fit, except apparently her. She noticed the stares first. Quick glances that lasted just a fraction too long. Eyes that flicked from her face to her uniform and back again, carrying questions that mouths didn't ask. A woman in the row behind her leaned toward her husband and whispered something. Elena couldn't hear the words, but she caught the tone. The doubt. She'd felt this before. In grocery stores, at parent-teacher conferences, at the DMV. That specific flavor of suspicion that came from people who couldn't reconcile what they saw with what they expected. A Latina woman in a military uniform covered in medals, sitting in the VIP section of an expensive private academy. The math didn't compute in their heads, so they questioned the variables. Elena kept her expression neutral. She'd learned a long time ago that reacting only made it worse. Defensiveness looked like guilt to people who'd already made up their minds. So she sat still, breathed evenly, and waited for her son to walk across that stage. Then she saw them approaching. 2 men in black polo shirts with Sentinel security embroidered across the chest. Private contractors, probably hired just for graduation events. The shorter one had a radio clipped to his belt and a clipboard in his hand. The taller one had the build of someone who'd spent more time at the gym than in actual security training, all biceps and no situational awareness. They stopped at the end of a row. The one with the clipboard looked down at his papers, then up at her, then back at his papers. "Excuse me, ma'am." Elena turned her head slightly. "Yes? Can I see your ticket, please?" She reached into her small clutch and pulled out the ticket, handing it over without comment. The guard studied it like it was written in code. His partner shifted his weight, crossing his arms. "This is Section A," the guard said slowly. "I'm aware." This section is reserved for VIP guests, family members of honor graduates. My son is the valedictorian. The guard's eyes narrowed slightly. He looked at her uniform, at her face, at the ticket, then back at his clipboard. He ran his finger down a printed list of names. I don't see your name on here. Elena's jaw tightened, but her voice stayed level. Then your list is incomplete. I have a valid ticket. My seat is assigned. My son is Marcus Vasquez, and he's giving the commencement address in approximately 8 minutes. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come with me so we can verify. There's nothing to verify. Everything is already verified. I'm sitting in my assigned seat. The second guard uncrossed his arms and took a step closer. Ma'am, you need to cooperate. People were starting to stare now. Not quick glances anymore, but full-on attention. Phones were subtly angling in their direction. The school board member had looked up from his screen. Elena could feel the moment crystallizing. This was the fork in the road. She could stand up, cause a scene, demand to speak to someone in charge. She could pull out her military ID, recite her service record, make them feel small. She could do what her training had taught her to do in hostile situations: assert dominance, control the engagement, neutralize the threat. Or she could do what she'd learned to do as a woman of color in America: comply, de-escalate, survive. I'm not moving, she said quietly. I have every right to be here. The first guard's face hardened. Ma'am, if you don't cooperate, we'll have to escort you out. On what grounds? Trespassing and disruption of a school event. The absurdity of it should have been funny. Commander Elena Vasquez, who'd run a trauma unit in Kandahar, who'd performed emergency chest compressions under mortar fire, who'd saved the lives of 23 service members in a single 72-hour period, was being threatened with removal from her own son's graduation for the crime of sitting in her assigned seat. She opened her mouth to respond, and then she heard it. The sound of 10 chairs scraping against hardwood. Not all at once, but in sequence. One, then another, then another. A ripple effect spreading across the gymnasium. Elena didn't turn around, but she felt the shift in the air. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 5 degrees. The ambient noise, the chatter, the rustling programs, the shuffling feet, died like someone had cut the power. The 2 guards looked past her, and the color drained from their faces. 10 men stood in various sections of the gym. Different ages, different builds, but identical bearing. Shoulders back, feet planted, arms loose at their sides. The kind of stillness that comes from muscle memory drilled into bone. Former Navy SEALs. Men Elena had served with in field hospitals from Helmand Province to Ramadi. Men she'd stitched back together after firefights. Men who'd been wheeled into her trauma bay with sucking chest wounds, severed arteries, traumatic brain injuries, and who'd walked out alive because she refused to let them die. Staff Sergeant David Cole stood near the back, his face carved from stone. Petty Officer Jake Morrison was 3 rows ahead, his eyes locked on the guards like a targeting laser. Lieutenant Marcus Bradford, no relation to her son, was positioned near the exit, blocking any easy retreat. They didn't say a word. They didn't have to. The message was clear. You're making a mistake. The guard with the clipboard swallowed hard. Do you know these men? Elena's voice was ice. They know me. The taller guard reached for his radio. You're not going to need anything, a new voice cut in. Principal Richard Holloway appeared at the end of the row, his face flushed and his expression somewhere between confused and furious. He was a thin man in his late 50s with wire-rimmed glasses and the permanent stoop of someone who'd spent 40 years bending down to talk to children. What's happening here? He demanded. The first guard straightened. Sir, we were attempting to verify this woman's credentials for VIP seating. Her credentials? Holloway's voice rose. That's Commander Elena Vasquez. She's the mother of our valedictorian. Her name has been on the VIP list for 3 weeks. What exactly are you verifying? The guard fumbled with his clipboard. She wasn't on our printed roster. Then your printed roster is wrong. Holloway turned to Elena, and his anger shifted to mortification. Commander Vasquez, I am so sorry. There's been a terrible misunderstanding. Has there? Elena's voice was quiet, but it carried. Holloway looked at the guards, at the 10 men still standing in silent formation, at the hundreds of witnesses now watching with rapt attention. His face went from flushed to pale. "Please," he said to Elena. "Stay. Of course you're staying. This is completely unacceptable." The guards exchanged glances. The taller one cleared his throat. "We were just following protocol." "What protocol?" one of the SEALs called out. It was David Cole, his voice carrying across the gym like a crack of thunder. "The protocol where you harass a decorated combat veteran at her son's graduation?" Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Phones were definitely recording now. Someone in the back row started clapping slowly, and others joined in. Not applause for the guards, applause for Elena. The principal held up his hands. "Everyone, please, let's not. The ceremony is about to begin. If we could all just..." The overhead speakers crackled to life. "Ladies and gentlemen," the vice principal's voice echoed through the gym, "please take your seats. The commencement ceremony will begin in 2 minutes." The 10 SEALs sat back down in perfect synchronization. The crowd settled into an uneasy quiet. The 2 guards backed away from Elena's row like they were retreating from a live grenade. Principal Holloway leaned in close to Elena. "Again, my deepest apologies. We'll discuss this after the ceremony." He hurried away before she could respond. Elena sat back in her chair, her heart pounding but her face composed. Around her, people were still stealing glances, but the nature of the looks had changed. Now there was curiosity, respect, maybe a little fear. The lights dimmed. Music swelled from the speakers, pomp and circumstance, the universal soundtrack of academic achievement. The rear doors opened, and the graduating class began filing in, 2 by 2, in caps and gowns of navy blue and gold. Elena scanned the procession until she found him. Marcus. Tall and lean, walking with the careful posture of someone trying not to trip over their own gown. He had her eyes and his father's jawline. His father, who'd died in a training accident when Marcus was 3, who'd never gotten to see his son grow into this remarkable young man. Marcus's eyes swept the crowd, searching. When they found Elena, his whole face lit up. He smiled, and she smiled back, and for a moment, everything else fell away. The graduating class filled the front rows. Faculty took their positions on the stage. The principal stepped up to the podium, adjusted the microphone, and began his opening remarks. Elena heard approximately none of it. Her attention was locked on her son, sitting in the front row with the other honor students, his hands folded, his expression serious. The ceremony proceeded through its familiar rhythms. Welcome speeches. Introduction of the school board. Recognition of scholarships and awards. Marcus's name was called multiple times: National Merit Scholar, Presidential Academic Fitness Award, full ride to Georgetown. Each time the applause was thunderous. Each time Elena clapped until her palms stung. And each time she felt the eyes on her, reassessing, recalculating. Finally, the principal returned to the podium. "It is now my honor," he said, "to introduce our valedictorian. Marcus Vasquez will be attending Georgetown University in the fall, where he plans to study international relations and public policy. He graduates today with a 4.0 GPA, having taken 12 AP courses and served as student body president, debate team captain, and volunteer coordinator for the Ashford Heights Food Bank. Please join me in welcoming Marcus Vasquez." The applause was deafening. Elena rose to her feet along with the rest of the crowd. Her eyes burned, but she didn't let the tears fall. Not yet. Marcus climbed the steps to the stage and crossed to the podium. He was 18 years old and looked both younger and older than that at the same time. He adjusted the microphone down to his height, pulled his speech from his pocket, and looked out at the sea of faces. And then he paused. His eyes found Elena in the third row, found the 10 men scattered throughout the crowd, found the 2 security guards lurking near the side exit. Something shifted in his expression. A hardening, a decision. He set his prepared speech down on the podium without looking at it. "Thank you, Principal Holloway," Marcus began. His voice was steady, clear. "Faculty, staff, honored guests, parents, and members of the graduating class. I had a speech prepared. I spent 3 weeks writing it. It's about opportunity and gratitude and the future we're all walking into, but I'm not going to read it." A confused murmur rippled through the audience. Principal Holloway shifted in his seat on the stage. Marcus's hands gripped the edges of the podium. "Instead, I want to talk about what just happened. 10 minutes ago, 2 security guards tried to remove my mother from this ceremony. They told her she didn't belong in the VIP section. They questioned her ticket, her credentials, her right to be here. They did this in front of hundreds of witnesses. They did this to a woman who has dedicated 16 years of her life to serving this country. They did this to a Navy commander who has saved more lives than most people will ever meet. The gymnasium went absolutely silent. They did this, Marcus continued, his voice rising, because they looked at her and decided she didn't fit their idea of who belongs in the VIP section. And if 10 Navy SEALs hadn't stood up and reminded everyone in this room who she really is, she might have been escorted out. My mother, at my graduation. Elena felt her breath catch. She wanted to tell him to stop, to not derail his moment for this, but she couldn't make herself move. I learned something today, Marcus said. I learned that all the awards and achievements and scholarships don't mean anything if we live in a world where a decorated combat veteran can be disrespected at her own son's graduation. I learned that sometimes the people who are supposed to protect us are the ones we need protection from. And I learned that real courage isn't about giving speeches or getting good grades. Real courage is sitting in your assigned seat and refusing to move when someone tells you that you don't belong. He looked directly at Elena. Mom, you taught me that strength doesn't shout. It stands. Thank you for standing. Thank you for always standing. The applause started in the back row where the SEALs sat. It spread like wildfire. Within seconds, the entire gymnasium was on its feet. Students, parents, faculty, everyone except the 2 security guards who had disappeared entirely. Marcus picked up his prepared speech, folded it carefully, and put it back in his pocket. That's all I wanted to say. Congratulations to the class of 2024. Let's go change the world. He walked off the stage to a standing ovation that lasted 3 full minutes. Elena stood with everyone else, tears streaming down her face now, no longer bothering to hide them. Around her, people were cheering, clapping, some crying themselves. The school board member in her row turned to her and offered a small, apologetic nod. The ceremony continued, but the energy had fundamentally shifted. Diplomas were distributed, names were called. Students crossed the stage, shook hands, moved their tassels. But everyone knew that the real moment had already happened. When the final graduate received their diploma and the principal declared the class officially graduated, the crowd erupted again. Caps flew into the air. Music blasted from the speakers. Students rushed to find their families. Marcus found Elena in the chaos. He wrapped his arms around her and she held him tight, this boy she'd raised between deployments and night shifts and all the moments she'd missed because duty called. You didn't have to do that, she whispered. Yes, I did. Behind them, the 10 SEALs had formed a loose perimeter, keeping the crowd from pressing too close. They weren't aggressive, just present, a quiet wall of protection. David Cole approached, his weathered face breaking into a rare smile. Hell of a kid you've got there, Commander. He gets it from his father, Elena said. He gets it from you. The other SEALs moved closer, offering handshakes and quick hugs. Jake Morrison clapped Marcus on the shoulder. That was the best commencement speech I've ever heard, and I've sat through about 30 of them. 30? Marcus asked. I have a lot of nieces and nephews. People were staring again, but differently now. Parents approached with cautious respect, introducing themselves, thanking Elena for her service, apologizing on behalf of the school. Some were genuine, some were performative. Elena accepted all of it with the same gracious nods and brief smiles. Principal Holloway appeared at her elbow, looking like he'd aged 5 years in the past hour. Commander Vasquez, if you have a moment, the school board would like to speak with you privately about what happened. Elena glanced at Marcus. He squeezed her hand. I'll wait right here. She followed Holloway through the crowd, the SEALs trailing a few steps behind without being asked. They walked down a corridor lined with trophy cases and student artwork, then into a small conference room where 3 school board members sat around a table looking various shades of uncomfortable. The board president, a silver-haired woman named Patricia Drummond, stood immediately. Commander Vasquez, thank you for meeting with us. I want to begin by offering our most sincere apologies for what occurred today. It was unacceptable, discriminatory, and completely antithetical to the values we claim to uphold at this institution. Elena remained standing. And yet it happened. Yes, it did. And we're launching an immediate investigation into how and why. I can tell you why. Elena said quietly. Those guards saw a brown woman in a military uniform sitting in the VIP section, and they didn't believe I belonged there. They made an assumption based on how I look, and they acted on it. The board members exchanged glances. One of them, a younger man with a nervous energy, cleared his throat. We've already terminated our contract with Sentinel Security. Both guards have been removed from the premises. We're reviewing our entire security protocol to ensure nothing like this happens again. That's a start. Patricia leaned forward. Commander, we would like to invite you to speak at a special assembly next week. We want our students to hear your story, to understand who you are and what you've accomplished. We want to make this right. Elena considered this. Part of her wanted to walk away, to let Marcus graduate in peace and never think about Pinehurst Academy again. But another part, the part that had stared down warlords and insurgents and bureaucrats who thought her life was worth less than theirs, wanted to make sure this never happened to anyone else. I'll think about it, she said finally. Back in the gymnasium, the crowd was thinning out. Families were taking photos on the stage. Students were signing each other's yearbooks. The cleaning crew was already starting to stack chairs. Marcus was exactly where Elena had left him, surrounded now by his classmates and their parents. When he saw her, he excused himself and jogged over. Well, they fired the security company. They want me to speak at an assembly. Are you going to? I don't know yet. One of Marcus's friends, a girl with bright red hair and a camera around her neck, approached shyly. Mrs. Vasquez, I'm Sarah Chen. I'm the editor of the school paper. Would you be willing to do an interview? About your service? About what happened today? About everything? Elena looked at Marcus. He shrugged. Your call, Mom. She turned back to Sarah. Let me think about that too. The afternoon stretched into evening. Photos were taken. Hugs were exchanged. The seals eventually drifted away with promises to stay in touch and invitations to a barbecue at David Cole's house next month. Elena and Marcus drove home in comfortable silence, the June sun casting long shadows across the Carolina pines. Their house was a modest ranch style in an older neighborhood. 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a yard that Marcus had mowed exactly twice before deciding he hated yard work. Inside, Marcus tossed his cap and gown over the back of the couch and headed straight for the kitchen. I'm starving. Graduation is exhausting. You gave 1 speech. An unscripted speech. That's way harder. Elena smiled and kicked off her shoes. Her feet ached. Her head ached. Her heart ached in that specific way that comes from being simultaneously furious and proud and exhausted. Marcus emerged from the kitchen with a sandwich that defied structural engineering and collapsed onto the couch. So, he said through a mouthful of turkey and cheese, that was eventful. That's one word for it. Are you okay? Really? Elena sat down beside him. I am. Are you? I'm pissed off, but yeah, I'm okay. They sat together in the quiet of their living room, the afternoon light filtering through the curtains, the sounds of the neighborhood drifting through the open windows, a dog barking, a lawnmower starting up, kids laughing. Normal life. The life Elena had fought to protect. The life those guards had tried to deny her. You know what the worst part is? Marcus said suddenly. It's not even that they did it. It's that they thought they could. They looked at you and thought, we can treat her like this and nobody will care. That's what makes me so angry. But people did care, Elena pointed out. 10 people stood up. Your principal intervened. The crowd applauded. You spoke up. People cared. Only after they saw the uniform. Only after the SEALs stood up. What if you'd been wearing regular clothes? What if those guys hadn't been there? Elena didn't have an answer for that because they both knew the truth. Without the visible markers of her service, without the dramatic intervention of 10 trained warriors, she probably would have been escorted out, and nobody would have questioned it. Marcus set his sandwich down. I'm glad I said what I said. I know I probably embarrassed you. You didn't embarrass me. You made me proud. Yeah? Yeah. He leaned against her shoulder, this young man who was somehow still her little boy. They sat that way until the light faded and the evening settled in, soft and warm. Neither of them knew it yet, but the video of Marcus's speech was already spreading. Sarah Chen had posted it to the school paper's social media account, and from there it had been shared to local news sites, parent groups, military family networks. By midnight, it would have 50,000 views. By morning, 500,000. And by the end of the week, the story of Commander Elena Vasquez and the graduation that tried to remove her would reach people in ways neither she nor Marcus could have predicted. But in that quiet moment on their couch, they didn't think about any of that. They just sat together in the gathering dark, mother and son, warrior and scholar, and let the world spin on without them for a little while longer. Because tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, the real consequences would begin. Tomorrow, justice would stop being a promise and start being a reckoning. But tonight, they rested. The phone started ringing at 6:30 in the morning. Elena woke to the sound slicing through her bedroom, her instincts kicking in before her eyes opened. Years of trauma alerts and emergency deployments had programmed her to go from unconscious to fully alert in seconds. She grabbed her phone from the nightstand, squinting at the screen. Unknown number. She let it go to voicemail. 30 seconds later, it rang again. Different unknown number. Then again. By the fourth call, Marcus appeared in her doorway, his hair sticking up in 17 directions, his expression confused and bleary. "Mom, what's happening? My phone's blowing up." Elena silenced her phone and sat up. "What do you mean?" "Like hundreds of notifications. Instagram, Twitter, people tagging me and stuff I can't even—" He stopped mid-sentence, staring at his screen. His eyes went wide. "Oh my God." "What?" He turned his phone toward her. The video playing showed Marcus at the podium, his voice clear and sharp. They did this to a woman who has dedicated 16 years of her life to serving this country. The view count at the bottom read 847,000. Elena's stomach dropped. "When did you post that?" "I didn't. Sarah did. Last night on the school paper's account. But it's everywhere now. Someone put it on TikTok and it went viral. There are news sites sharing it. Military pages. Mom, this is national." Elena took his phone and scrolled through the comments. Thousands of them, pouring in by the second. This made me cry. What a disgrace to treat a veteran like that. That kid is going places. Standing up for his mom like that. The fact that she had to prove she belonged tells you everything you need to know about this country. Those guards should be in jail. Why isn't anyone talking about the 10 SEALs? That part gave me chills. Her phone rang again. This time she recognized the number, David Cole. "Commander?" His voice was tight when she answered. "You seen what I'm seeing?" "Just found out. My phone's been ringing since 0500. Press, bloggers, some podcast wants to interview all of us. This thing's got legs." "How many views?" "Last I checked, 1.2 million and climbing. Jake's freaking out because someone identified him in the video and now his ex-wife is calling asking why he never mentioned knowing you. It's a whole situation." Elena rubbed her temples. "What do we do?" "Nothing. You did nothing wrong. Those guards screwed up, the school's handling it, and your kid gave a hell of a speech. Let it play out." "David, Commander, I mean it. The only people who should be worried right now are those two jackasses who put their hands on you. You just stay quiet and let the internet do what it does best." After they hung up, Elena sat on the edge of her bed, trying to process. One day. It had been less than 24 hours since the graduation, and already the story had escaped the boundaries of Ashford Heights and spread like wildfire across the country. Marcus hovered in the doorway. "Are you mad?" "At you? No. At Sarah? No. At the situation? Yes. I can ask her to take it down." "It's too late for that. Once something's on the internet, it's permanent." She wasn't wrong. By the time they made it downstairs for breakfast, the video had been picked up by 3 major news networks. CNN had run a segment during their morning broadcast. Fox News had invited Elena to appear on their evening show. A local NBC affiliate had already sent a crew to park outside their house. Elena pulled back the living room curtain an inch and saw the white van with the satellite dish on top, parked directly across the street. "We're not leaving this house today," she said flatly. Marcus peered over her shoulder. "Is that legal? Can they just camp out like that?" "Public street. They can do whatever they want as long as they stay off our property." Her phone rang again. This time it was Principal Holloway, and his voice had the frantic edge of someone whose quiet Tuesday had turned into a public relations nightmare. Commander Vasquez, I'm so sorry to call so early, but we're being inundated with media requests. The school board is convening an emergency meeting this afternoon. They'd like you to attend if possible. Why? Because this story is national news now, and we need to get ahead of it. We need to show that we're taking this seriously and that we're committed to making things right. Elena's jaw tightened. You mean you need me to make a statement that makes the school look good? A pause. That's not how I would phrase it, but that's what it is. Commander, please, we're not the enemy here. We fired those guards. We're reviewing our policies. We want to support you, but we also need to manage this situation before it spirals further out of control. It's already out of control, which is why we need your help. Elena closed her eyes. She could hang up. She could refuse to participate in whatever carefully choreographed press conference they were planning. She could tell them all to go to hell and deal with it themselves. But that wouldn't make the cameras go away. That wouldn't stop the story from spreading. And it definitely wouldn't prevent this from happening to someone else. What time? She asked. 3 o'clock. The main conference room at the district office. I'll be there. After hanging up, she found Marcus in the kitchen making eggs with the focused intensity of someone trying not to think about the media circus surrounding their house. They want me at a school board meeting this afternoon. He flipped an egg with more force than necessary. Are you going? I think I have to. You don't have to do anything. Marcus, I'm serious. You've already sacrificed enough. You don't owe these people a performance just because they screwed up and got caught. She leaned against the counter. It's not about them. It's about making sure this doesn't happen again. And you think one meeting is going to fix systemic racism and discrimination? The question hung in the air between them, sharp and uncomfortable, because they both knew the answer was no. One meeting wouldn't fix anything. 10 meetings wouldn't fix it, but silence wouldn't fix it either. I have to try, Elena said quietly. Marcus plated the eggs and slid one across to her. Okay, then I'm coming with you. You don't need to Yeah, I do. You stood up for me yesterday. I'm standing up for you today. The school district office was a low brick building on the edge of Ashford Heights, surrounded by pine trees and a parking lot that was normally half empty. Today, it was packed. News vans lined the curbs. Reporters clustered near the entrance with cameras and microphones. When Elena's car pulled in, every head turned. Marcus drove because Elena's hands were shaking too much. He found a spot near the back and killed the engine. Ready? He asked. No. Me neither. Let's go. They got out of the car and immediately the crowd surged forward, questions fired from every direction like bullets. Commander Vasquez, how do you feel about the guard's termination? Do you plan to take legal action against the school? What message do you want to send to other veterans facing discrimination? Marcus, how did it feel to defend your mom like that? Elena kept her head down and walked. Marcus stayed close to her side, his hand on her elbow, guiding her through the chaos. A security guard, different company, different uniforms, held the door open and quickly shut it behind them, muffling the noise. Inside, the building was quiet and cold. Patricia Drummond waited in the lobby along with Principal Holloway and 2 people Elena didn't recognize. A woman in a severe black suit who looked like an attorney, and a man with salt and pepper hair wearing a military dress uniform. Patricia stepped forward, hand extended. Commander Vasquez, thank you so much for coming. This is Rebecca Torres, our district counsel, and Colonel James Hartford, retired Army. He's volunteered to serve as a liaison for this process. Elena shook hands mechanically. Colonel Hartford's grip was firm, his eyes sharp. Commander, he said quietly, it's an honor. Something in his tone made her believe he meant it. They were ushered down a hallway into a large conference room where the rest of the school board sat around a massive oak table. Nameplates identified each member. Water bottles and legal pads were arranged with geometric precision. Everything about the room screamed damage control. Patricia took her seat at the head of the table and gestured for Elena to sit across from her. Marcus sat beside his mother. Colonel Hartford positioned himself slightly behind them, a silent presence. Let's begin, Patricia said. First, I want to reiterate our profound apologies for what happened at yesterday's graduation. It was unacceptable, and we take full responsibility. One of the other board members, a heavy-set man with a red tie, leaned forward. We've already taken swift action. Both guards have been terminated. Sentinel Security's contract has been canceled. We're implementing new training protocols for all event staff. Rebecca Torres, the attorney, slid a document across the table. We've also drafted a formal apology letter to be released to the press this evening. We'd like your approval before we publish it. Elena scanned the letter. It was 2 paragraphs of carefully crafted corporate speak that acknowledged the incident without actually accepting blame for anything systemic. Words like unfortunate misunderstanding and isolated incident jumped out at her. She set it down without signing. This isn't an apology. This is liability management. Patricia's smile tightened. Commander, I assure you, you're calling it a misunderstanding. There was no misunderstanding. Those guards saw me, made an assumption based on my race, and acted on it. That's not a misunderstanding. That's discrimination. The room went very quiet. The man in the red tie shifted uncomfortably. With all due respect, Commander, we can't make legal admissions in a public statement that would expose the district to what? Consequences? Marcus's voice cut like a blade. God forbid the school actually faces consequences for letting its security harass people. Young man, don't young man me. You're sitting here trying to protect yourselves when you should be protecting students and families from being treated like criminals for existing while brown. Patricia held up her hands. Please, let's all take a breath. We're on the same side here. Are we? Elena asked. Because from where I'm sitting, you're more concerned with the school's reputation than with actual accountability. Colonel Hartford spoke for the first time. May I make a suggestion? Patricia nodded, looking grateful for the interruption. Commander Vasquez has been invited to speak at a special assembly, Hartford said. Instead of releasing a pre-written statement to the press, why not let her speak directly to the students and community? Show that you're willing to listen and learn, not just protect your image. The board members exchanged glances. Patricia drummed her fingers on the table. That's actually not a bad idea. Commander, would you be willing to do that, to speak at an assembly? Elena considered. On one condition, I speak freely. No script, no pre-approval of what I'm going to say. You give me the platform, and I'll use it honestly. Another pause. Rebecca Torres looked like she wanted to object, but Patricia spoke first. Agreed. We'll schedule it for Friday, 3 days from now. They discussed logistics for another 20 minutes. Timing, media access, student attendance. When the meeting finally concluded, Elena and Marcus stood to leave, but Patricia pulled Elena aside. Can I speak with you privately for just a moment? Marcus gave his mother a questioning look. She nodded. I'll meet you at the car. Once they were alone, Patricia's professional demeanor cracked slightly. She suddenly looked older, more tired. My daughter is biracial, she said quietly. She's 12. And when I saw that video of what happened to you, all I could think about was her in a few years being treated like she doesn't belong somewhere she has every right to be. Elena's expression softened just a fraction. I know this looks like political maneuvering, Patricia continued. And honestly, some of it is. I have to protect the district, but I also have to sleep at night knowing I did the right thing. Those guards were wrong. The fact that they felt empowered to do what they did means we've failed somewhere in our culture, our training, our hiring, and I want to fix that. One assembly won't fix it. No, but it's a start, and I'm asking you to help us start. Elena studied the woman in front of her, searching for signs of insincerity and finding only exhaustion and genuine remorse. Okay, she said finally. Friday. Outside, the media circus had only intensified. More cameras, more reporters, more questions shouted over each other in a cacophony of noise. Marcus had the car running, and Elena slid into the passenger seat with relief. What did she want? He asked as they pulled out of the parking lot. To convince me she's human. Did it work? Maybe. They drove in silence for a few minutes, the familiarity of Ashford Heights rolling past the windows. Strip malls and gas stations, and the turnoff to Marcus's elementary school, where Elena had once shown up in full combat gear straight from the airport to surprise him at the 4th grade talent show. Marcus's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his face went pale. What? Elena asked. Someone found the guards. Their names are out there. Home addresses. One of them is getting death threats. Elena's stomach twisted. Pull over. What? Pull over, now. Marcus guided the car into a shopping center parking lot and stopped. Elena took his phone and scrolled through the posts. Someone had doxed both former security guards. Full names, addresses, phone numbers, places of employment. The comments below were vicious. These racist pigs need to pay. Someone should show up at their houses and see how they like being harassed. I hope they never work again. Elena handed the phone back. This is wrong. They harassed you, Mom. And they lost their jobs. That's the consequence. But this? She gestured at the phone. This is mob justice, and it helps no one. So what are you going to do? I'm going to make a statement. Saying what? That this needs to stop. Marcus stared at her like she'd suggested flying to the moon. You're going to defend the guys who tried to throw you out of my graduation? I'm going to defend the principle that justice doesn't mean destruction. Those men were wrong. They paid for it. But turning them into targets for violence doesn't make anything better. She pulled out her own phone and opened Twitter. She'd created an account years ago and never used it. She had 47 followers, most of them bots. That was about to change. She typed, I'm Elena Vasquez. What happened at my son's graduation was wrong, and I'm grateful for the accountability that followed. But doxing and threatening the individuals involved is not justice. It's revenge. We can demand better without becoming worse. Let them rebuild their lives. That's how we all move forward. She hit send before she could second-guess herself. Within minutes, the responses started flooding in. Most were supportive, praising her grace and restraint. But others were angry, accusing her of protecting racists, of being weak, of letting people off the hook. Marcus read over her shoulder. People are going to be pissed. People are already pissed. At least this way I'm pissed with integrity. Her phone rang. David Cole again. Commander, what the hell are you doing? The right thing. You just defended the guys who grabbed you. I defended the concept of proportional consequences. There's a difference. A long sigh on the other end. You're braver than me. I hope you know what you're doing. I have no idea what I'm doing, David, but staying silent felt worse. That evening, Elena's tweet had been retweeted 50,000 times. News outlets were running segments about it. Some praised her moral clarity, others criticized her for being too forgiving. The narrative around the story was shifting, becoming less about the incident itself and more about what justice should look like in the age of social media. Elena turned off her phone at 8 o'clock and made dinner. Spaghetti with meat sauce, Marcus's favorite. They ate at their small kitchen table with the curtains drawn against the lingering news crews outside. Georgetown called today, Marcus said casually, twirling pasta on his fork. Elena looked up. And? They wanted to make sure the video wouldn't affect my admission. I told them if it did, I didn't want to go there anyway. Marcus, I'm kidding. They were actually super supportive, said they were proud to have me. But they also asked if you'd consider speaking at their Veterans Day event in the fall. They asked you that? They asked if I could pass along the message. Apparently your tweet made you a hot commodity. Elena snorted. I'm not a commodity. I'm just tired. You look it. Gee, thanks. They finished eating and cleaned up together, falling into the easy rhythm of shared chores. Marcus washed, Elena dried. The dishwasher had been broken for 3 months, and they kept meaning to fix it, but never quite got around to it. You nervous about Friday? Marcus asked, scrubbing a plate. Terrified. You're a combat medic. You've literally been shot at. I'd rather be shot at than give a speech in front of 1,000 teenagers. You'll be great. You don't know that? Yeah, I do, because you don't know how to be anything else. Elena dried the last dish and set it in the rack. Through the window above the sink, she could see the news van still parked across the street, its satellite dish pointed at the sky like a mechanical prayer. The next 2 days passed in a blur of interviews, phone calls, and preparations. Elena declined most media requests, but agreed to sit down with a local reporter from the Ashford Heights Gazette, a woman named Keisha Walker, who'd been covering military family issues for 15 years. They met at a coffee shop downtown, away from the cameras and chaos. Keisha was in her 40s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. I'm not interested in the clickbait version of this story, she said as soon as they sat down. I want to know who you are beyond the viral video. So Elena told her. About growing up in Texas, the daughter of immigrants who'd worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table. About joining the Navy at 19 because she wanted to serve and because she needed the GI Bill. About meeting her husband during training, losing him 6 years later, raising Marcus alone while deploying to war zones. People see the uniform and think they know the story, Elena said. Strong woman, dedicated service member, proud mother, and that's all true. But it's not complete. They don't see the nights I cried myself to sleep because I missed my son's birthday. They don't see the guilt that comes with choosing duty over presence. They don't see how much it costs to be both a good soldier and a good mother. Keisha's pen moved steadily across her notepad. What do you want people to understand about what happened at the graduation? Elena thought for a moment that it wasn't really about me. It was about every person of color who's been told they don't belong somewhere they have every right to be. It was about the assumptions we make and the power we give to those assumptions. And it was about what happens when people decide to stand up and say, "This is wrong." The SEALs. The SEALs. My son. The people in the crowd who applauded instead of staying silent. Change doesn't happen because one person gets treated unfairly. It happens because other people refuse to let that unfairness continue. The interview ran in Thursday's paper under the headline, Commander Elena Vasquez, When Silence Isn't an Option. It was thoughtful, nuanced, and didn't try to turn her into either a saint or a victim. Just a woman navigating an impossible situation with as much grace as she could muster. Friday morning arrived with clouds and humidity that promised rain. Elena woke early, rehearsed her speech in the mirror, changed her outfit 3 times, and finally settled on her navy dress whites again. If people were going to see her, they might as well see all of her. Marcus came downstairs already dressed in khakis and a button-down shirt. You ready? No, let's go anyway. The assembly was scheduled for 10 o'clock in the same gymnasium where the graduation had been held. When Elena and Marcus arrived at 9:30, the parking lot was already packed. Students filed in through the main entrance, their voices a low rumble of anticipation. Inside, the gym had been transformed. A proper stage with lighting, a sound system that looked professional, rows of chairs instead of folding bleachers. This wasn't just an assembly, it was an event. Principal Holloway met them at the side entrance, looking nervous. We're expecting about 1,200 people, students, faculty, some parents, and unfortunately, a pool camera crew. The board insisted on media access. Elena nodded. She'd expected as much. Colonel Hartford appeared, resplendent in his army dress uniform. Commander, whenever you're ready. I'm not ready. Nobody ever is. Come on, come. They walked backstage together, Marcus trailing behind. Through a gap in the curtains, Elena could see the gymnasium filling up. Students in their uniforms, Pinehurst Academy required them, talking, laughing, checking their phones. Teachers lining the walls, the camera crew setting up in the back. And in the front row, sitting in a cluster, the 10 Navy SEALs. David Cole caught her eye and gave a small nod. Jake Morrison raised his hand in a subtle wave. They'd all come, even though she hadn't asked them to. The lights dimmed. Principal Holloway walked to the podium and tapped the microphone. Good morning, everyone. Please take your seats. The noise settled into expectant silence. Today, we have a very special guest, someone who was wronged during our graduation ceremony and who has shown remarkable grace in the aftermath. I'd like to invite Commander Elena Vasquez to the stage. The applause started immediately. Elena walked out from behind the curtain and the sound intensified. Students stood. The SEALs stood. Within seconds, the entire gymnasium was on its feet. Elena reached the podium and waited for the noise to fade. When it finally did, she gripped the edges of the wooden stand and looked out at a sea of young faces. Thank you, she said. Her voice echoed through the speakers, strong and clear. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm terrified right now. Public speaking isn't my strength. My strength is keeping people alive when everything around them is trying to kill them. But I'm here because Principal Holloway asked and because I think we need to talk about what happened. She paused, gathering her thoughts. 2 security guards asked me to leave this gymnasium on Saturday. They didn't believe I belonged in the VIP section. They didn't believe my ticket was valid. They didn't believe I was Marcus's mother. And when I refused to move, they threatened to forcibly remove me. The room was absolutely silent now. I want to be clear about something. This wasn't about two bad individuals. This was about a system that allowed them to make those assumptions and act on them without consequence. This was about implicit bias, about who we automatically trust and who we automatically doubt. A few students nodded. Others looked uncomfortable. I could stand here and tell you about my 16 years of service, about the medals on my chest and what each one represents, about the soldiers I saved and the friends I lost. But you know what? I shouldn't have to prove my worth to sit in a seat I paid for. None of us should. We shouldn't have to perform excellence just to be treated with basic dignity. More nodding. Some of the students were leaning forward now, engaged. My son stood at this podium 6 days ago and said something I want to repeat. Real courage isn't about awards or achievements. It's about standing your ground when someone tells you that you don't belong. But here's what I want to add. Real courage is also about standing up when you see someone else being told they don't belong. She looked directly at the SEALs. 10 men stood up for me that day. They didn't have to. They could have stayed in their seats. But they understood that silence is complicity. They understood that if good people do nothing, bad things flourish. And they refused to be silent. Elena's hands tightened on the podium. So here's what I'm asking you. When you see someone being treated unfairly, in this school, in your community, anywhere, don't stay seated. Don't stay silent. Stand up. Speak up. Because change doesn't happen when one person gets discriminated against. Change happens when everyone else decides that discrimination is unacceptable. The applause started again, but Elena held up her hand. I'm not finished. The room quieted. I also want to talk about what happened after the video went viral. People found the personal information of those two guards and posted it online. They sent death threats. They tried to destroy lives. And I want to say clearly and publicly, that is not justice. That is revenge. And revenge doesn't build anything. It just burns everything down. Some confusion rippled through the crowd. This wasn't what they'd expected to hear. Those men were wrong. They lost their jobs. They faced consequences. But they're still human beings who deserve the chance to learn and grow and do better. Justice is about accountability, not annihilation. If we want a better world, we have to be better people. Even when we're angry. Especially when we're angry. She took a breath. I don't have all the answers. I'm figuring this out as I go, just like all of you. But I know this. Strength isn't about dominating others. It's about standing firm in your values, even when the world tells you to compromise them. Courage isn't about never being afraid. It's about being terrified and doing the right thing anyway. Elena's voice softened. To every student in this room who's ever felt like they don't belong, you do. To every person who's been doubted because of how they look or where they come from, you matter. To everyone who's tired of fighting for basic respect, I see you. I am you. And we're not going anywhere. She stepped back from the podium. The applause was immediate and overwhelming. Students jumped to their feet. Teachers clapped. The SEALs stood at attention, hands over their hearts. But Elena's eyes were on the back of the gymnasium, where the doors had just opened and 2 men in business suits walked in, followed by a woman with a badge clipped to her belt. Federal agents. And they were walking straight toward the stage. The applause died the moment the federal agents reached the edge of the stage. Elena's combat instincts kicked in instantly. Assess the threat. Identify exits. Calculate response time. The woman with the badge was late 30s, dark hair pulled back tight, FBI credentials visible on her hip. The 2 men flanking her wore the identical expressions of people who'd done this 1,000 times before. Principal Holloway rushed forward from the wings, his face cycling through confusion and panic. Can I help you? This is a school assembly. The woman held up her badge without looking at him. Special Agent Lisa Reeves, FBI. We need to speak with Commander Vasquez immediately. The gymnasium erupted in whispers. Phones came out. The camera crew swung their equipment toward the commotion. Elena descended the stage steps with measured calm, even though her heart was hammering. Marcus started to follow, but David Cole materialized beside him, one hand on his shoulder. Stay here, Cole said quietly. Elena met Agent Reeves at the base of the stairs. Up close, the agent's eyes were sharp and calculating, scanning Elena the way she'd learned to scan combat zones. Commander Vasquez, we need you to come with us. On what grounds? We have questions regarding a federal investigation. You're not under arrest, but your cooperation would be appreciated." The gym was dead silent now, except for the soft whir of the camera. 1,200 people watching, waiting. Elena kept her voice level. "What investigation? That's not a conversation for a public venue." "Then it's not a conversation I'm having without my attorney present." Agent Reeves' expression didn't change. "We can do this here or at our field office. Your choice." One of the SEALs, Jake Morrison, stood up from his seat. Then another. Then all 10 of them, moving in synchronized precision toward the stage. Not threatening, just present. The male agents' hands drifted toward their waistbands. Reeves shot them a look that said, "Stand down without words." "Commander," Reeves said, her tone shifting fractionally toward something almost respectful, "we're not here to arrest you, but we are investigating threats made against the 2 security guards from Saturday's incident. Death threats, doxing. Someone vandalized one of their homes last night. Your viral tweet and public statements make you a relevant witness." The words hit Elena like a gut punch. "I condemn the threats publicly." "We know, which is why we want to talk to you. You might be able to help us identify who's escalating this." Marcus pushed past David Cole and bounded down the bleacher steps. "She's not going anywhere without a lawyer." "Marcus," Elena started. "No, you taught me to stand up when something's wrong. This is wrong. They're trying to intimidate you in front of everyone to make some kind of point." Agent Reeves turned her attention to Marcus. "And you are?" "Her son, the one who gave the speech that started all this." "Then you should want us to catch the people sending death threats. I want you to treat my mother with the respect she deserves instead of ambushing her at a school assembly." Reeves studied him for a long moment, then looked back at Elena. "We can wait outside. Take 10 minutes to arrange representation. But this conversation is happening today." Elena nodded once. "Fine." The agents retreated toward the exit. The moment they were gone, the gymnasium exploded with noise. Students talking over each other, teachers trying to restore order, Principal Holloway looking like he might faint. Colonel Hartford appeared at Elena's elbow. "I know a JAG attorney in Raleigh. She's good. I can have her here in an hour." "Make the call." Rebecca Torres, the district counsel, materialized from somewhere in the crowd. "Commander, as your employer's legal representative, I strongly advise, with respect, you represent the school's interests, not mine. I need my own counsel." Torres nodded tightly and stepped back. David Cole moved in close, voice low. "You want us to shadow you? FBI doesn't usually roll 3 deep for a witness interview. Something's off." "I noticed." "Say the word and we follow that convoy wherever it goes." Elena looked at the 10 men who'd appeared in her life like guardian angels at the exact moment she'd needed them. They'd do it too. Follow federal agents, risk obstruction charges, all because she'd once kept their blood inside their bodies when the world was trying to let it out. "No. But stay with Marcus until I get back." "You sure?" "I'm sure." Hartford returned, phone in hand. "Attorney's name is Captain Diane Wu, retired JAG, now civilian practice. She's leaving Raleigh now. She'll meet you at the FBI field office in 45 minutes." Elena turned to address the still chaotic gymnasium. She didn't return to the stage, just raised her voice from where she stood. "Everyone, please, I need you to listen." The noise gradually subsided. What you just witnessed is part of the complicated reality of public attention. Sometimes doing the right thing means dealing with difficult consequences. The FBI is investigating threats made against the security guards. I'm going to cooperate fully because I meant what I said. Revenge isn't justice. I'll be fine. Please don't let this derail the important conversations we need to keep having. She looked directly at Marcus. "I'll call you in a few hours." Then she walked out of the gymnasium with her head high and her spine straight, every inch the commander she'd been trained to be. The FBI field office was a nondescript building in a Charlotte office park, 40 minutes from Ashford Heights. Agent Reeves drove a black Suburban with tinted windows. Elena sat in the back seat, watching the Carolina landscape blur past, trying to figure out what angle she was missing. Death threats weren't unusual in viral incidents, but federal involvement meant either the threats were credible enough to warrant resources, or there was something else happening beneath the surface. They pulled into an underground garage. Reeves led her through security checkpoints and up an elevator to the third floor. Conference room 3B was windowless and sterile. Table, chairs, recording equipment, the faint smell of industrial cleaner. Coffee? Reeves offered. No, thank you. Water? I'm fine. Reeves sat across from her, placing a manila folder on the table but not opening it. Your attorney should be here shortly. While we wait, can I ask you something off the record? Nothing's off the record in a federal building. A ghost of a smile crossed Reeves's face. Fair. Let me rephrase. I'm curious about something. You condemn the threats against those guards publicly. Why? Because threatening people's lives is wrong. Even people who discriminated against you? Especially them. Hate doesn't cancel out hate. It just creates more of it. Reeves tapped her fingers on the folder. Most people in your position would want blood. I'm not most people, and I've seen enough blood for several lifetimes. The door opened and Captain Diane Wu walked in like she owned the building. She was early 50s, compact and fierce, with silver streaking through her black hair and the bearing of someone who'd spent decades staring down military bureaucracy. Commander Vasquez, I'm Diane Wu. We spoke briefly on the phone. She set her briefcase down and turned to Reeves. What's the charge? There is no charge. Your client is here as a witness. Then why the dramatic public extraction? We needed to speak with her quickly. The investigation is time-sensitive. Wu pulled out a chair and sat. Well, I'm here now. Let's hear it. Reeves finally opened the folder and slid several printed screenshots across the table. Tweets, Facebook posts, Reddit threads, all containing variations of the same message. Threats against the two security guards, graphic descriptions of violence, personal information. Over the past 4 days, we've documented 237 credible threats against Raymond Bosco and Travis Hernandez, the guards from your son's graduation. 3 threats specifically mentioned your name and suggested you deserved revenge. Last night, someone threw a brick through Bosco's living room window with a note attached, for Commander Vasquez. Elena's stomach turned. I never asked for that. We know, but someone thinks they're acting on your behalf, or they're using your situation as justification for their own agenda. Either way, we need to identify them before this escalates further. Wu leaned forward. What exactly are you asking my client to do? We want her to make another public statement, something that might draw out whoever's coordinating this harassment campaign. We've traced some of the threats to encrypted forms, but we need a catalyst to force movement. You want to use her as bait, Wu said flatly. We want to use her platform to prevent violence. Elena looked between them. What kind of statement? Reeves pulled out another document. We've drafted something. Basically, you'd emphasize again that you don't support the threats, that you're cooperating with the investigation, and that you want the harassment to stop. Wu took the document and scanned it. Her expression darkened. This is a script. You want her to read your words? We want to control the message to maximize investigative value. Absolutely not. Commander Vasquez doesn't work for the FBI. She doesn't read statements she didn't write. Ms. Wu, Captain Wu. And unless you're charging my client with something, she's free to leave. Reeves's jaw tightened. 2 men are receiving death threats because of what happened at a high school graduation. Commander Vasquez's voice carries weight in this situation. She could help stop this. Elena spoke quietly. What happens if I don't cooperate? The investigation continues without your assistance. But if someone gets hurt, if Bosco or Hernandez ends up dead because we couldn't identify the threat in time, that's going to be difficult for everyone involved. The implicit accusation hung in the air like smoke. Wu stood abruptly. We're done here. Commander, let's go. But Elena didn't stand. She looked at the screenshots again, at the vitriol and violence being conducted supposedly in her name, and felt the weight of it pressing down on her shoulders. I'll make a statement, she said, but not your statement. Mine. I'll say what needs to be said in my own words. Reeves and Wu both started to speak. Elena held up a hand. I'm not doing this for the FBI. I'm doing it because it's right. Give me 24 hours. I'll post something that might help your investigation. But I'm not reading a script, and I'm not coordinating with you about the content. Reeves considered this. Will you at least tell us before you post it? No, because then it's not genuine, and the people you're trying to flesh out will know it's a setup. Wu touched Elena's arm. Commander, I strongly advise against making any public statements without legal review. Noted. I'm doing it anyway. Reeves closed the folder. Okay. Do it your way. But if this goes sideways, it's on you. Elena stood. Everything's been on me since this started. I'm used to it. Wu drove Elena back to Ashford Heights in tense silence. When they finally pulled up to Elena's house, Wu turned off the engine and faced her. That was either very brave or very stupid. Welcome to my life. It's usually both. The FBI doesn't play games, Commander. If you're going to make this statement, make sure it's bulletproof. Don't give them anything they can use against you. I'm just going to tell the truth. The truth is often the most dangerous thing you can say. Inside the house, Marcus was pacing the living room while David Cole sat on the couch scrolling through his phone. Both looked up when Elena walked in. Well? Marcus demanded. I'm not under arrest. They wanted me to help with the investigation into the death threats. And I'm going to make another statement tomorrow. Cole frowned. Against your lawyer's advice, I'm guessing. How'd you know? Because you've got that look. The same one you had in Kandahar when you insisted on going into a hot zone to extract wounded, even though command said it was too dangerous. People needed help. Yeah, and you almost got your head blown off. Marcus slumped into a chair. Mom, why can't you just let the FBI handle this? Because it's my name being used to justify violence. That makes it my responsibility. You're one person. You can't control what strangers do on the internet. No. But I can control what I say and do. And right now, saying something is better than staying silent. She spent the rest of the evening drafting her statement, writing and rewriting until the words felt right. Not performative, not political, just honest. Around midnight, with Marcus asleep upstairs and the house finally quiet, Elena opened Twitter and began typing. My name is Elena Vasquez. Over the past week, my family and I have been at the center of a national conversation about discrimination, justice, and accountability. I'm grateful for the support we've received, but I'm deeply troubled by the violence being conducted in my name. Raymond Bosco and Travis Hernandez made a mistake. They faced consequences, they lost their jobs, but they don't deserve to have their lives threatened or their homes vandalized. No one does. If you're sending death threats, doxing people, or encouraging violence because you think you're defending me, stop. You're not helping. You're making everything worse. Justice isn't about destroying people who make mistakes. It's about creating a world where those mistakes happen less often. To everyone who's been discriminated against, dismissed, or told you don't belong, I see you. I am you. But we don't fight hatred with more hatred. We fight it by being better than the people who wronged us. To the people investigating the threats, I hope you find who's responsible. I'll cooperate however I can. But I want to be clear. I don't want revenge. I want change. Real strength isn't about dominating others. It's about standing firm in your values even when the world tells you to compromise, even when you're angry, even when revenge would feel so much easier than restraint. Choose restraint. Choose humanity. Choose better. She read it 3 more times, checking for anything that could be twisted or misinterpreted. Then she hit send and turned off her phone. The response was immediate and overwhelming. By morning, the tweet had 2.3 million impressions. Major news outlets were covering it. Political commentators were dissecting it. Some praised her moral courage. Others accused her of protecting racists. The debate raged on without her participation because Elena refused to turn her phone back on. Instead, she made breakfast with Marcus, cleaned the kitchen, and tried to pretend the world outside their house didn't exist. At 10 o'clock, someone knocked on the front door. Elena checked the peephole and saw a young woman in jeans and a university sweatshirt holding a bouquet of flowers. Not a reporter, not a federal agent, just a stranger. She opened the door cautiously. Can I help you? The woman's eyes were red like she'd been crying. Are you Commander Vasquez? Yes. I'm sorry to just show up. I saw your address online and I know that's creepy, but I needed to thank you. Elena's hand tightened on the doorframe. Thank me for what? My little brother is autistic. Last month, mall security accused him of shoplifting because he was stimming and they thought he looked suspicious. They detained him, scared him so badly he didn't speak for 3 days. When I saw what happened to you, when I saw your son stand up and those soldiers stand up, I realized we don't have to just accept it when authority figures are wrong. We can push back. We can demand better. The woman held out the flowers. They were grocery store carnations. Nothing fancy, but her hands were shaking. So thank you for showing people like my brother and me that we matter, that we deserve to be treated with dignity. Elena took the flowers, her throat tight. What's your name? Sarah Ling. Sarah, I'm sorry about your brother. Is he okay now? He's getting there. We filed a complaint. The security guard was reprimanded. It's not much, but it's something. And it wouldn't have happened if I hadn't seen your story and realized I had the right to be angry. They talked for a few more minutes before Sarah left, apologizing again for the intrusion. Elena closed the door and leaned against it, holding the cheap carnations and trying not to cry. Marcus came down the stairs. Who was that? Someone whose life I apparently touched without knowing it. That's kind of amazing. It's kind of terrifying. Her phone rang. She'd turned it back on reluctantly an hour ago, and now she regretted it. Unknown number. She answered anyway. Commander Vasquez, a man's voice, older, with a slight southern accent. Speaking. My name is Raymond Bosco. I was one of the security guards at your son's graduation. Elena's breath caught. Marcus's eyes went wide. Mr. Bosco, I saw your statement, both of them. The first one telling people to leave us alone, and the one last night about choosing restraint. I needed to call and say thank you, and to apologize. Elena sank onto the couch. You don't need to thank me for asking people not to threaten your life. Maybe not, but I do need to apologize for what I did, for how I treated you. I've spent the past week thinking about it, about why I assumed you didn't belong there. And the honest answer is that I looked at you and made a judgment based on things that had nothing to do with who you actually are. Implicit bias. Racism, Bosco said bluntly. Let's call it what it is. I'm 62 years old, Commander. I grew up in a different time, but that's not an excuse. I should know better. I do know better. And I still screwed up. What happens now? For me? I'm probably never working security again. My name's been all over the news. But honestly, maybe that's how it should be. Maybe I needed to face real consequences to understand how serious this is. I'm enrolling in some diversity training courses. Probably should have done that 30 years ago. Elena didn't know what to say. This wasn't the conversation she'd expected to have when she woke up this morning. Mr. Bosco, I appreciate you calling. I do, and I hope you mean what you're saying about learning and growing, but I need you to understand something. The reason this hurt so much wasn't just because you questioned my credentials. It was because your assumptions reinforced a system that tells people who look like me that we're always going to be suspects first and citizens second. I know, and I'm sorry, truly. They talked for another few minutes before hanging up. Elena set the phone down and looked at Marcus. Did that really just happen? I think so. One of the guys who tried to remove you just called to apologize. Apparently, Marcus shook his head slowly. This whole thing is insane. Welcome to the 21st century, where nothing makes sense and everything happens too fast. The next call came an hour later. Agent Reeves, your statement worked. We've identified 3 individuals coordinating the harassment campaign. 2 arrests have already been made. The 3rd is in custody in Oregon. None of them have any connection to you or the original incident. They're just opportunists using your situation to push their own agenda. What happens to them? Federal charges, cyberstalking, making terroristic threats, conspiracy? They're looking at serious prison time. Elena felt relief wash over her. What about Bosco and Hernandez? They're safe. We'll maintain protective surveillance for another few weeks, but the immediate threat is neutralized. You did good, Commander. After hanging up, Elena finally allowed herself to breathe. The knot of tension that had been living in her chest since the FBI showed up at the assembly began to loosen. Marcus grabbed his car keys. I need to get out of this house. Want to drive somewhere? Where? Anywhere. Nowhere. Does it matter? They ended up at the state park 20 minutes outside Ashford Heights, walking the trail around the lake in companionable silence. The June heat had broken slightly, and a breeze moved through the pine trees. Georgetown starts in 10 weeks, Marcus said eventually. I know. You're going to be alone in that house. I've been alone before. That was different. I was deployed, not in college. You could tell yourself it was temporary. Elena stopped walking and looked out at the water, perfectly still and reflecting the sky like a mirror. I'm proud of you, Marcus, of who you've become despite everything. Because of everything. You think I'd be going to Georgetown if you hadn't pushed me? You pushed yourself. Because you taught me how. He picked up a flat stone and skipped it across the lake. 3 bounces. What are you going to do when I'm gone? Same thing I've always done. Show up, do the work, keep standing. That sounds exhausting. It is, but it's also the only way I know how to live. They finished the loop and drove back as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. The house felt different when they returned, lighter somehow, like something heavy had been lifted. Elena checked her phone one last time before bed and found a message from Patricia Drummond, the school board president. Commander Vasquez, the board met in emergency session today. We've decided to establish the Elena Vasquez Scholarship Fund for students from underrepresented communities pursuing military service or public service careers. We're starting with $50,000 and hope to grow it substantially. We'd be honored if you'd serve on the selection committee. Elena read the message twice, not quite believing it. From being nearly removed from her son's graduation to having a scholarship fund named after her in less than 2 weeks. She showed Marcus. He grinned. That's pretty cool, Mom. It feels weird. Get used to it. You're kind of famous now. I don't want to be famous. I just want to be left alone. Too late for that. He was right, she realized. The video had been viewed 20 million times now. Her Twitter following had grown to 400,000. Interview requests came in daily from everyone from local news to national podcasts to international documentaries. The quiet life she'd fought to build after retiring from active duty was gone, replaced by something louder and more complicated and infinitely more public. That night, Elena lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the familiar sounds of her house settling. Somewhere down the hall, Marcus was probably still awake, scrolling through social media or texting his friends or doing whatever 18-year-olds did at midnight. Her phone buzzed one more time, a text from a number she didn't recognize. Commander Vasquez, this is Travis Hernandez, the other guard from graduation. I don't have the courage Raymond does to call you, but I wanted to say I'm sorry too. What we did was wrong. You deserved better. I'm working on being better. Thank you for asking people not to hurt us. You didn't have to do that. Elena typed a response. Thank you for reaching out. I hope you mean it about being better. That's all any of us can do. She sent it and turned off her phone for the night. Sleep came slowly, and when it finally did, her dreams were full of gymnasiums and stages and crowds of faces she didn't recognize. But somewhere in the chaos, the 10 SEALs stood in formation, silent and steady, and she knew that whatever came next, she wouldn't face it alone. The next morning broke clear and bright. Elena made coffee and stood on her small back porch, watching birds fight over the feeder Marcus had hung last summer. Her phone was still off. The world could wait a few more hours. Marcus appeared in the doorway, already dressed. Mom, you need to see something. What now? Just come look. She followed him to the front of the house. He pulled back the curtain. The street was lined with people, dozens of them, maybe 100, standing quietly on the sidewalk holding signs. Thank you, Commander. You taught us to stand. Real strength doesn't shout. Ashford Heights stands with Elena Vasquez. Elena's hand went to her mouth. They've been gathering since sunrise, Marcus said softly. Just standing there, not protesting or chanting, just showing up. One woman at the front of the crowd was Sarah Ling, the girl who'd brought flowers yesterday. She saw Elena at the window and raised her sign higher. We matter because you stood. Elena's eyes burned. She opened the front door and stepped onto the porch. The crowd erupted in applause, not performative, not demanding, just genuine appreciation from people whose lives had been touched by her refusal to move from a seat she'd earned the right to occupy. She raised one hand in acknowledgement, unable to speak past the emotion clogging her throat. And that's when the black SUV pulled up, parking at an angle that blocked traffic. Federal plates. Tinted windows. The back door opened and Agent Reeves stepped out, followed by a man in a Navy admiral's uniform Elena didn't recognize. The crowd went silent. Reeves walked up the front path with the admiral beside her. When they reached the porch, the admiral extended his hand. "Commander Vasquez, I'm Admiral Christopher Haynes, Naval Personnel Command. I apologize for the unannounced visit, but this couldn't wait." Elena shook his hand, confusion and concern warring in her expression. "Admiral, what's this about?" Haynes pulled an envelope from his jacket. Official Navy letterhead. He handed it to her with both hands, a gesture of respect. "Commander, you've been recalled to active duty, effective immediately." Elena's hands trembled as she opened the envelope. The crowd on the street pressed closer, trying to see what was happening. Marcus stood frozen in the doorway, his face pale. The letter was brief, formal, devastating. "Commander Elena Vasquez, you are hereby recalled to active duty under Title 10 U.S.C. Section 12301D for a period not to exceed 180 days. Report to Naval Medical Center, Portsmouth, Virginia, no later than 0800 hours on June 24, 2024. Assignment? Senior Trauma Coordinator, Emergency Preparedness Division. Today was June 18th. She had 6 days. Elena looked up at Admiral Haynes, searching his face for answers. "I don't understand. I've been retired for 3 years. My contract expired. You can't just—" "We can, and we have. The recall authority exists for medical personnel with critical specializations. Your expertise is needed." "For what?" Haynes glanced at the crowd, at the cameras that had inevitably appeared, at Agent Reeves standing silent and watchful beside him. "That's classified. But I can tell you this much. Your public profile over the past 2 weeks hasn't gone unnoticed at the Pentagon. Neither has your demonstrated ability to remain composed under pressure. We need someone with your specific skill set and your particular brand of credibility." Marcus found his voice. "She just got dragged through national media because of discrimination. She's been dealing with death threats and FBI investigations. And now you're forcing her back into service?" "I'm not forcing anything. The recall is lawful and binding, but Commander Vasquez has options. She can request a hardship exemption. She can appeal through proper channels. She can—" "Report as ordered," Elena said quietly. "That's what you're really saying. I can fight this and lose, or I can go willingly and maintain some dignity." Haynes's expression softened fractionally. "Commander, I know this is unexpected, but I wouldn't be here if it wasn't critical. We need you." Sarah Ling stepped forward from the crowd, her voice carrying across the yard. "You can't do this to her. She's been through enough." Others joined in, a chorus of protest rising from the street. Someone started filming. The moment was being captured for posterity, for social media, for the next chapter of a story that refused to end. Elena held up her hand and the crowd quieted. "Thank you, all of you, but this is different. This isn't discrimination. This is duty." She looked at the admiral. "Sir, I need 48 hours to settle my affairs. My son leaves for college in August. I have obligations here. You have 72 hours from receipt of these orders. That's already built in. Report date stands at the 24th. Marcus's jaw clenched. "This is bullshit." "Marcus," Elena said sharply. "No, it is. They're punishing you for speaking up. They're getting you out of the public eye because you're making people uncomfortable." Admiral Haynes turned to face Marcus directly. "Son, I understand you're upset, but your mother is one of the finest trauma surgeons the Navy has ever produced. She saved lives that no one else could have saved. If we're recalling her, it's because people are going to die without her expertise, not because we want her silenced. Then why now? Why 6 days' notice? Because the situation that requires her skills emerged 6 days ago." The weight of that statement settled over the porch. Elena understood military logistics well enough to know that emergency recalls didn't happen over publicity problems. They happened when crises demanded specific expertise that couldn't be replicated. Agent Reeves spoke for the first time. Commander, I should mention that the FBI investigation is closed. The individuals responsible for the threats have been charged. Your cooperation was invaluable. You're free of any further obligation there. How convenient, Marcus said bitterly. Investigation closes, and suddenly she's being shipped out. The timing is coincidental, Reeves replied, but her tone suggested even she didn't fully believe it. Elena folded the letter and looked at the Admiral. Sir, I'll report as ordered, but I need to know, is this punitive? Am I being reassigned because of what happened here? Haynes met her eyes without flinching. Commander, I give you my word as an officer. This recall is based solely on operational necessity. Your trauma expertise, your experience with mass casualty events, and your ability to train other medical personnel in high-stress environments make you uniquely qualified for what we're facing. The fact that you've also demonstrated exceptional composure under public scrutiny is a bonus, not the reason. What kind of operational necessity requires a recalled trauma surgeon with 6 days' notice? The kind I can't discuss in front of civilians and cameras. Fair enough. Elena had held security clearances high enough to know when classified meant actually classified versus bureaucratically convenient. She extended her hand. Then I'll see you on the 24th, sir. Haynes shook it firmly. Thank you, Commander. A car will pick you up at 0600 on the 24th. Bring your service records and medical certifications. Everything else will be provided. He and Agent Reeves returned to the SUV and drove away, leaving Elena standing on her porch with 100 witnesses and a son who looked like his world had just collapsed. The crowd didn't disperse. If anything, they pressed closer, voices rising in a mixture of support and outrage. This is wrong! She deserves better! Commander, we'll fight this with you. Elena raised both hands. Please, everyone, I appreciate your support more than you know. But this isn't a fight. This is service. I took an oath. That oath doesn't expire just because I'm not wearing the uniform every day. If my country needs me, I go. Sarah Ling's eyes were wet. But you just got home. You just got to rest. Rest is a luxury. Duty isn't. Marcus turned and walked back into the house without a word. Elena followed, leaving the crowd to slowly disperse in confused clusters, unsure whether they'd just witnessed injustice or sacrifice. Inside, Marcus was pacing the living room like a caged animal. You can fight this. Captain Wu said you have options. Hardship exemption, appeal process, and drag it out for months while people die because the Navy doesn't have the personnel they need. Why do you always do this? Do what? Put everyone else first. You've spent my entire life sacrificing for strangers. When do you get to just be my mom and stay home? The words hit like shrapnel. Elena sank onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. You think I want to leave? You think I want to miss watching you get ready for Georgetown, helping you pack, driving you to campus? You think I'm choosing duty over you? Aren't you? I'm choosing duty because someone has to. Because if everyone with the skills to save lives decided their comfort was more important, the world would be a darker place. I taught you to stand up when something's wrong. Well, this is me standing up. This is what it looks like. Marcus stopped pacing. His anger deflated into something raw. I'm scared. What if something happens to you? I'll be at a medical center in Virginia, not a combat zone. You don't know that. They won't even tell you what you're doing. Which means it's serious enough to classify. Which means it's important enough to matter. He sat down heavily beside her. I hate this. So do I. They sat in silence for a long moment before Marcus spoke again. What do you need me to do? Stay here. Finish your summer. Go to Georgetown in August like we planned. Live your life. Who's going to take care of the house? David Cole already volunteered. I texted him while the Admiral was talking. Of course you did. Elena's phone started ringing. She ignored it. It rang again and again. By the fourth call, she finally looked. Principal Holloway. She answered. Yes? Commander Vasquez, I just heard about the recall. I'm so sorry. Is there anything the school can do? We still want you on the scholarship committee. We can do everything remotely, or we can postpone. The scholarship can proceed without me. Find someone else for the committee, someone who will actually be present. But we wanted you specifically? Then you should have moved faster. I appreciate the gesture, truly. but I have 6 days to prepare for deployment and a son to get ready for college. The scholarship will have to honor me in absentia." She hung up before he could respond. Over the next 72 hours, Elena's life compressed into a series of rapid-fire tasks. Medical records retrieved from storage, certifications verified and updated, emergency contacts designated, power of attorney arranged, bills set to autopay, house key given to David Cole. Marcus oscillated between helpful and sullen, packing her gear 1 minute and slamming cabinets the next. Elena let him process in his own way, understanding that anger was easier than fear. On the third day, Captain Diane Wu called. "Commander, I've been reviewing your recall orders. There's something off about the timing." "What do you mean?" "Emergency recalls under 12,301D require a written justification from the Secretary of the Navy and approval from the Assistant Secretary for Manpower. Those approvals typically take weeks to process. Your orders were issued 6 days ago, which means the request originated before the graduation incident even happened." Elena's breath caught. "Before?" "At least 2 weeks before, based on standard processing timelines, which means this recall has nothing to do with getting you out of the public eye. It was already in motion. Then why show up at my house with cameras everywhere? Why make it public?" I don't know. But I wanted you to understand, whatever this assignment is, it was planned well in advance. You're not being punished or silenced. You're being deployed for something that was critical enough to start the recall process before you became a household name. After hanging up, Elena sat with this information, turning it over in her mind. The timing made the Admiral's words more credible, but it also raised new questions. What kind of operation required her specifically? What was so critical that the Navy had started recall paperwork while she was still a private citizen preparing to watch her son graduate? The answer came on day 4, not from official channels, but from an unexpected source. Jake Morrison appeared at her door at 7 in the morning, looking grim. "Commander, we need to talk. Somewhere private." They walked to the state park, the same trail Elena had walked with Marcus. Morrison waited until they were half a mile from the parking lot before speaking. "I still have friends in the community, active duty SEALs. They're hearing things about a situation developing overseas, mass casualty event in the planning stages. Multiple nations involved. They need someone who can coordinate trauma response across different military medical systems. That's above my pay grade." "It was. Past tense. Your recall includes a promotion. You're going to Portsmouth as a captain. The rank came through yesterday." Elena stopped walking. "How do you know that?" "Because one of my guys is stationed there and saw the personnel roster. Your name's on it. Captain Elena Vasquez, Senior Trauma Coordinator. You're not going to treat patients, Commander. You're going to organize the people who treat patients when something catastrophic happens." "What kind of catastrophic?" Morrison shook his head. "I don't know specifics, but the chatter suggests a multinational exercise that went sideways, training accident with mass casualties, or a terrorist event at an Allied base, something that requires immediate expertise and absolute discretion." "Why tell me this?" "Because you should know what you're walking into. This isn't punishment. This is the Navy recognizing that you're the best person for an impossible job, and because you deserve to know you're being recalled for the right reasons, not the political ones." They walked back in silence. When they reached Elena's car, Morrison pulled her into a brief, fierce hug. "Give 'em hell, Captain!" The next day, Elena visited Marcus at the coffee shop where he'd been working summer shifts. He was behind the counter making an elaborate latte for a customer who kept changing her order. When he finally delivered it, he spotted Elena and waved her over. "Mom, you're not supposed to be here. I thought you were packing." "Finished. I wanted to see you at work. See this whole part of your life I usually miss." Marcus wiped down the espresso machine. "It's just coffee." "It's you building independence. That's not just anything." A customer approached and Marcus took their order, black coffee, simple, while Elena waited. When he handed over the cup, the customer did a double take. "Wait, are you Commander Vasquez from the video?" Elena tensed but nodded. "My daughter is autistic, nonverbal. After I saw your story, I started pushing back when people dismiss her or treat her like she's less than human. You taught me it's okay to demand respect. So thank you. The woman left before Elena could respond. Marcus stared after her. Does that happen a lot now? More than I'd like. Less than I probably deserve. What does that even mean? It means I'm still figuring out how to exist as a public person when I only ever wanted to be a private one. Marcus finished his shift and they drove home together. The house felt emptier already, like it knew she was leaving. Boxes of her military gear sat stacked in the hallway. Her dress uniform hung on the back of the bedroom door, freshly pressed. That night, Elena couldn't sleep. She lay in bed running through mental checklists, preparing for a mission she didn't fully understand. At 2 a.m, she gave up and went to the kitchen. Marcus was already there, eating cereal at the table. Can't sleep either? Elena asked. Nope. Keep thinking about you leaving. She poured herself water and sat across from him. Want to talk about it? Not really, but I probably should. They sat in the quiet kitchen with only the refrigerator's hum for company. Finally, Marcus spoke. I'm proud of you. I know I've been angry and scared, but I'm also proud. Not everyone's mom gets recalled to active duty because she's the best at what she does. Marcus, let me finish. I'm proud, and I'm terrified, and I'm angry that you have to go. All of those things are true at the same time, but mostly, I just want you to know I understand why you're going. You taught me that standing up means showing up even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Elena's eyes burned. When did you get so wise? I had a good teacher. They talked until sunrise, the conversation ranging from practical logistics to philosophical questions neither of them could answer. When the light finally broke through the kitchen window, they made breakfast together one last time. The morning of the 24th arrived cold and gray. The car came at exactly 600, a Navy sedan with a driver who loaded Elena's bags with efficient silence. Marcus stood on the front porch in his pajamas, arms wrapped around himself against the chill. Elena hugged him tight. I love you. Make me proud at Georgetown. You already make me proud everywhere. Come home safe. That's the plan. She climbed into the sedan and watched her house disappear in the rearview mirror. The driver didn't attempt conversation, which Elena appreciated. She spent the 4-hour drive to Virginia preparing mentally for whatever waited. Naval Medical Center Portsmouth was massive, a sprawling complex of buildings that housed everything from basic care to cutting-edge research. The driver delivered her to the administrative building where a junior officer checked her credentials and escorted her to a conference room on the 3rd floor. Admiral Haynes was already there, along with 2 other officers Elena didn't recognize and a civilian in an expensive suit. Captain Vasquez, welcome. Please sit. The promotion still felt strange. Captain. 2 ranks above where she'd been when she retired. Sir, respectfully, I'd like to know what I'm doing here. Haynes nodded to the civilian, who pulled out a tablet and brought up a satellite image. 3 weeks ago, a joint training exercise in the Mediterranean involving U.S., NATO, and Allied forces experienced a catastrophic equipment failure. A transport ship carrying 400 personnel suffered an engine explosion and fire, mass burn casualties, smoke inhalation, traumatic injuries. The ship managed to reach port, but the medical response was fragmented and chaotic. 37 people died who might have survived with better coordination. Elena studied the image. And you're planning another exercise. We're planning the next 50 exercises, but we need to ensure medical response protocols are standardized across Allied forces. We need someone who can develop training programs, coordinate between different military medical systems, and prepare for worst-case scenarios. Someone with actual combat trauma experience who understands how systems fail under pressure. You need me to make sure 37 deaths don't become 300. Exactly. The other officers took turns briefing her on the scope. She'd be working with medical teams from 12 different nations, developing standardized triage protocols, creating training simulations, coordinating equipment and personnel across language and bureaucratic barriers. It was massive, impossible, exactly the kind of challenge that would consume every waking hour for the next 6 months. When do I start? Elena asked. You already have. Your team is waiting in conference room B. The meeting lasted 3 hours. By the end, Elena had folders full of information, a laptop encrypted 6 ways from Sunday, and a headache that promised to become permanent. She was assigned quarters on base, a small apartment that was somehow both sterile and claustrophobic. She unpacked her bags, set up her laptop, and called Marcus. "Hey, Mom, you there safe?" "I'm here. Can't tell you much about what I'm doing, but I'm safe." "That's classified comfort." "Thanks." They talked for 20 minutes about nothing important, his work shifts, a movie he'd seen, and a friend who was leaving for college early. Normal life continuing without her. After hanging up, Elena sat at the small desk and opened her laptop. Emails were already flooding in. Requests for meetings, draft protocols requiring review, personnel files for the team she'd be leading. One email stood out, from Patricia Drummond, the school board president. "Captain Vasquez, I wanted you to know the scholarship fund has reached $200,000. The response has been overwhelming. People want to honor what you represent: service, integrity, grace under pressure. We've also received a request from the NAACP to partner on expanding the program. I hope when you return you'll consider joining us for a formal launch event. You changed something here. Don't forget that." Elena closed the email and looked around her sparse quarters. This was her life now, at least for the next 6 months. Away from Marcus, away from Ashford Heights, away from everything she'd been building toward a quiet retirement. But the work mattered. If she could prevent another ship fire from becoming a mass casualty disaster, if she could save lives by making systems more efficient, then the sacrifice was worth it. Her phone buzzed. A text from David Cole. "House is secure. Marcus stopped by to grab some stuff. Kids holding up okay? You focus on whatever classified nonsense they've got you doing. We've got the home front." Another text came in. This one from a number she didn't recognize. "Captain Vasquez, this is Sarah Ling, the girl who brought you flowers. I'm starting college in the fall studying social work because of you. Because you showed me that standing up matters. Thank you for everything. Come home safe." Then another, and another. Messages from people whose lives she'd touched without knowing it. Students from Pinehurst Academy, parents from Marcus's school. Veterans from online forums, strangers who'd seen the video and felt something shift in their understanding of courage. Elena read each one, feeling the weight of expectation and gratitude pressing down like physical force. She was about to turn off her phone when one final message came through. Unknown number. She almost deleted it. "Captain Vasquez, you don't know me. My name is Detective Laura Mendez, Charlotte PD. I've been investigating Sentinel Security, the company that provided guards for your son's graduation. Something's wrong. The company has ties to a larger organization that's been flagged for discriminatory hiring practices and civil rights violations. The guards who confronted you weren't random employees. They were specifically assigned to that event. I think someone wanted you removed. I need to talk to you. This goes deeper than anyone realizes." Elena stared at the message, her blood turning cold. Someone had specifically assigned those guards. Someone had wanted her removed from her own son's graduation. This wasn't random bias. This was deliberate. She was about to respond when her door opened without warning. Admiral Haynes stood in the hallway, his face grim. "Captain, we have a situation. There's been another incident, a training base in Germany. Explosion during live fire exercises. 60 casualties inbound. We need your protocols now, not in 6 months. You're activated for immediate deployment to Landstuhl Regional Medical Center. Wheels up in 3 hours." Elena's mind spun. Germany, immediate deployment, and somewhere back in North Carolina, evidence that her son's graduation hadn't been just a random act of discrimination, but something planned and purposeful. "Sir, I need to make a phone call first." "No time. You can call from the plane. This is why you're here, Captain. People are dying. Let's move." Elena grabbed her go bag and followed the Admiral down the hallway, her mind racing. The message from Detective Mendez burned in her pocket like a live grenade. Someone had wanted her silenced before the video even went viral, before the national attention, before any of this became public. Which meant someone had known she was going to speak up, had known she wouldn't just quietly accept discrimination, had known exactly who she was. And as the staff car raced toward the airfield with sirens clearing traffic, Elena realized with cold certainty that the graduation incident had never been about 2 guards making a mistake. It had been a test, and she'd just been recalled to active duty by the same system that had orchestrated it. The C-17 Globemaster climbed through turbulence over the Atlantic, its cargo hold filled with medical equipment and personnel headed to Germany. Elena sat strapped into a jump seat, laptop balanced on her knees, trying to focus on casualty projections while Detective Mendez's message replayed in her mind. They were specifically assigned to that event. Admiral Haynes sat across from her, reviewing reports on a tablet. Elena waited until they reached cruising altitude before speaking. "Sir, I need to ask you something." He looked up. "Go ahead." "My recall orders. You said they were initiated 2 weeks before the graduation incident. Who requested them?" Haynes's expression didn't change. "That's above your clearance level, Captain. With respect, sir, I just received information suggesting the incident at my son's graduation wasn't random. Someone may have deliberately placed those guards there. If my recall is connected, it's not." Haynes set down his tablet. "Captain, I understand you're processing a lot right now, but the two situations are completely separate. Your recall came from Naval Medical Command based on operational necessity. Period. Then who at Medical Command made the request? Captain Vasquez, you're about to coordinate trauma response for 60 casualties. I need you focused on that, not conspiracy theories about your son's graduation." It wasn't a conspiracy theory. Elena had spent 16 years reading people in life or death situations. She knew when someone was hiding something, but she also knew when to stop pushing. "Understood, sir." The flight took 8 hours. Elena used the time to finalize triage protocols, review the medical capacity at Landstuhl, and coordinate with the German military medical teams already on site. By the time they touched down, she had a complete operational plan and a growing certainty that something was deeply wrong. Landstuhl Regional Medical Center was controlled chaos. Ambulances lined the emergency bay. Medical personnel moved with urgent precision. The casualties from the training explosion were already arriving: burns, blast injuries, traumatic amputations, the kind of carnage Elena had seen too many times in combat zones. She hit the ground running, triaged the incoming wounded, reorganized the trauma bays for maximum efficiency. Deployed the protocols she'd been developing. Within 4 hours, the chaos had crystallized into organized urgency. Within 8, they'd saved 17 people who would have died under the old system. The work consumed her for 3 days. She slept in 4-hour increments, ate standing up, and functioned on pure muscle memory. But in the quiet moments between crises, Detective Mendez's message haunted her. On the 4th day, a Navy courier delivered a sealed envelope marked "Eyes Only." Elena opened it in her temporary office and found a single sheet of paper. "Captain Vasquez, this is Detective Mendez. I couldn't reach you by phone, so I'm using official channels. My investigation into Sentinel Security has uncovered something significant. The company is a subsidiary of Hartwell Global Solutions, a private military contractor with a history of discriminatory practices and civil rights violations. Records show Sentinel was specifically contracted for Pinehurst Academy's graduation through a shell company that traces back to a Foundation board member. That board member is Marcus Whitmore, former Marine Corps officer, current defense industry lobbyist, and vocal opponent of diversity initiatives in military contracting. I believe you were targeted as part of a larger effort to discredit prominent minority service members. I have evidence. I need to talk to you." Elena read it 3 times, each pass making her angrier and more focused. Marcus Whitmore. She didn't know the name, but the pattern was clear. Someone had tried to humiliate her publicly, probably assuming she'd react with anger or file a lawsuit, creating a narrative of a difficult minority officer playing the victim card. They hadn't counted on 10 Navy SEALs standing up. They hadn't counted on her son's eloquence. They hadn't counted on the video going viral for the right reasons instead of the wrong ones. She pulled out her phone, finally allowed to make personal calls after the immediate crisis had stabilized, and dialed the number Mendez had included. "Detective Mendez, Charlotte PD. Detective, this is Captain Elena Vasquez. I got your message." "Captain, thank God. Are you somewhere secure?" Elena glanced around her empty office. "Secure enough. I need to walk you through what I've found. Hartwell Global Solutions has been operating a systematic campaign to undermine diversity initiatives across military contracting. They've targeted at least 8 high-profile minority service members over the past 2 years. Manufactured incidents designed to create negative press, filed frivolous complaints, attempted to provoke reactions that could be weaponized. You were supposed to be number 9. Why me specifically? Because you're credible, decorated, and visible. If they could make you look bad, if they could turn your son's graduation into a story about an angry minority officer making a scene, it would have damaged the broader push for equity in military leadership. Whitmore has been lobbying against diversity quotas in defense contracting. You were collateral damage in a political agenda. Elena's hand tightened on the phone. What's your evidence? Emails between Whitmore and Sentinel Security Management, payment records, a memo outlining the strategy. I've shared everything with the FBI. Your friend Agent Reeves is coordinating with us. But I wanted you to know directly. This wasn't about you being in the wrong place. This was about someone trying to put you there. After hanging up, Elena sat in the quiet office, processing rage and vindication in equal measure. Someone had tried to destroy her reputation as a calculated political move, had tried to turn her son's proudest moment into ammunition for discrimination, and they'd failed so completely that she'd instead become a symbol of exactly what they'd been trying to undermine. Her phone rang. Agent Reeves. Captain Vasquez, I assume you've spoken with Detective Mendez. Just now. We're moving fast on this. Whitmore's lawyer reached out an hour ago trying to negotiate. We told him to pound sand. We have enough evidence for conspiracy charges, civil rights violations, fraud. The U.S. Attorney is preparing indictments. This is going to be very public and very ugly for everyone involved. Good. There's one complication. Whitmore's claiming he was working with someone inside the Navy. Someone who provided him with information about your background, your schedule, your son's graduation. Someone who wanted you discredited just as badly as he did. Elena's blood went cold. Who? We don't know yet. The communications were routed through encrypted channels, but we're working on it. In the meantime, watch your back. If there's someone inside the system targeting you, your recall might not be as clean as Admiral Haynes suggested. After the call ended, Elena stared at the wall of her office, pieces clicking together. Someone in the Navy had fed information to Whitmore. Someone had wanted her removed from public view, either through scandal or through recall. Someone who knew exactly who she was and what she represented. Her door opened without warning. Admiral Haynes stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. Captain, we need to talk, privately. He closed the door and sat across from her desk. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he pulled out his phone, typed something, and turned the screen toward her. It was an email dated 3 weeks before her son's graduation. Subject line, recall request, Captain Elena Vasquez. The sender was Captain Robert Driscoll, Deputy Director of Naval Medical Personnel. Driscoll initiated your recall, Haynes said quietly, not because we needed you for this operation, though you've been invaluable, but because he wanted you out of civilian life before you could become a problem. A problem how? Driscoll is old guard, thinks diversity initiatives are weakening military readiness. When he learned you'd been invited to speak at several high-profile veteran events, when he saw you were becoming a voice for minority service members, he decided to neutralize you. He reached out to Whitmore, they served together in the Marines, and helped orchestrate the graduation incident. When that backfired spectacularly, he pushed through your recall to get you away from cameras and crowds. Elena's voice was ice. You knew this. I suspected. I didn't have proof until 2 hours ago when Agent Reeves sent me the FBI's evidence file. Driscoll's communications with Whitmore are all there. He violated about 17 regulations and probably committed a few felonies in the process. And you brought me here anyway. I brought you here because we genuinely need your expertise. The Germany operation is real. The casualties are real. Your protocols have saved lives. But I also brought you here to get you somewhere safe while the investigation unfolds. Driscoll has connections. He could have made your life very difficult if you'd stayed stateside and visible. Elena stood, rage and exhaustion warring in her chest. I don't need protection. I need justice. You're about to get both. Haynes stood as well. Driscoll was arrested 3 hours ago. FBI took him into custody at his office in Bethesda. The charges include conspiracy, abuse of authority, violations of the Uniform Code of Military Justice, and about 6 flavors of civil rights violations. He's facing court-martial and federal prosecution. What about Whitmore? Arrested this morning. The U.S. attorney held a press conference 40 minutes ago. It's all over the news. The story's broken wide open. Conspiracy to discriminate against minority service members, fraudulent contracting schemes, the whole network. Sentinel Security's being shut down. Hartwell Global Solutions is under investigation, and every victim they targeted over the past 2 years is coming forward. Elena sank back into her chair. It's over. The criminal part is, the fallout's just beginning. Navy Public Affairs wants you to make a statement. So does the Secretary of Defense. You're about to become the face of this whole mess, whether you want to be or not. I never wanted to be a face. I just wanted to watch my son graduate. I know, but that's not the hand you got dealt. Haynes pulled out a folder and set it on her desk. Your recall orders are being modified. You can return stateside immediately if you want, or you can stay here and finish the work you started. Either way, you're in control of what happens next. Elena opened the folder. Inside was a letter signed by the Secretary of the Navy himself, offering her a permanent position as Director of Trauma Medicine Coordination with the rank of captain and full autonomy to build the program she'd been developing. Or she could take an honorable discharge, return to civilian life, and finally get the quiet retirement she'd been chasing for 3 years. What would you do, sir? Haynes smiled slightly. I'd probably tell the secretary where to stick his letter and go home to my family. But I'm not you. You've never taken the easy path. Why start now? After he left, Elena sat alone with the decision weighing on her. Through the window, she could see medical personnel moving between buildings, continuing the work of saving lives. The protocols she'd implemented were functioning. The systems she'd designed were working. She'd made a difference here. A real, measurable difference. But Marcus was starting college in 6 weeks. The house in Ashford Heights sat empty except for David Cole checking on it. Her life, her real life, was waiting. She pulled out her phone and called her son. Mom, are you okay? I saw the news about the arrests. Is it true? Did someone really set you up? It's true. It's over now. The people responsible are in custody. Holy shit, sorry. Holy crap, this is insane. Marcus, I need to tell you something. I've been offered a permanent position here. Important work, good rank, chance to make real systemic change. But it would mean staying active duty for at least another 3 years. Missing most of your college experience. Being gone more than I'm present. Silence on the other end, then, what do you want to do? I don't know. Part of me wants to take the job because the work matters. But part of me is so tired of missing your life. Then come home. It's not that simple. Yeah, it is. You've sacrificed enough. You've served enough. You've proven everything you needed to prove and then some. Come home. Let someone else save the world for a while. I need my mom more than the Navy needs another captain. Elena's throat tightened. You sure? I'm sure. Besides, the scholarship fund needs you. Sarah Ling emailed me yesterday. They're planning a whole launch event. You should be there for that. When did you get so wise? I told you. Good teacher. Elena made her decision in that moment. She'd given 16 years to the military. She'd saved countless lives. She'd built systems and trained personnel and bled for her country in deserts and mountains, and now hospital corridors. She'd earned the right to choose herself, to choose her son, to choose the quiet life she'd been fighting for all along. She drafted her response to the Secretary of the Navy by hand, old school, the way important military communications used to be done. Mr. Secretary, I'm honored by your offer and grateful for the opportunity to serve. The work here at Landstuhl has been meaningful and necessary, but I've been fighting other people's battles for 16 years. It's time I went home and lived my own life. I respectfully decline the position and request immediate honorable discharge. I'll complete the current operation and transfer my protocols to my designated successor. Thank you for everything. Respectfully, Captain Elena Vasquez. She handed it to Admiral Haynes the next morning. He read it without expression, then looked up at her. You're really doing this. I'm really doing this. The Navy's going to lose one hell of a medical officer. The Navy has plenty of excellent medical officers. My son only has one mother. Haynes extended his hand. It's been an honor, Captain Vasquez. Go home. You've earned it. The discharge process took 2 weeks. Elena spent the time training her replacement, documenting her protocols, and ensuring the systems she'd built would continue functioning without her. By the time she boarded the flight back to the States, 60 lives had been saved using her methods, and 3 other medical centers had adopted her triage systems. She'd left her mark. That would have to be enough. Marcus met her at the airport, leaning against his car in the pickup area with a grin that made him look 12 years old again. Elena dropped her bags and hugged him so hard he wheezed. Okay, I need to breathe. Too bad. I'm hugging you until I feel like stopping. They drove back to Ashford Heights with the windows down and terrible pop music blasting from the radio. The house looked exactly the same. David Cole had kept his promise. But somehow it felt different. Lighter. Like possibility lived in the walls now instead of just memory. Inside, the dining room table was covered in mail. Bills, junk, and a thick envelope from Pinehurst Academy. Elena opened it to find an invitation embossed in gold. You are cordially invited to the inaugural launch event of the Elena Vasquez Scholarship Fund. Join us as we celebrate service, courage, and the power of standing up. August 15th, 7 p.m. Marcus looked over her shoulder. Are you going? I think I have to. This whole thing started because I refused to move from a seat I'd earned. Seems fitting to show up when they're honoring that refusal. The news about Driscoll and Whitmore's arrests had dominated headlines for a week before fading into the background noise of the news cycle. Both men were facing serious prison time. Sentinel Security had dissolved. Hartwell Global Solutions had lost billions in government contracts. 8 other service members who'd been targeted came forward, and each of their cases was being investigated. The system that had tried to destroy Elena had instead destroyed itself. 2 days before the scholarship launch, Detective Mendez called with an update. Captain Vasquez, Ms. Vasquez now, I wanted to let you know the trial dates have been set. Whitmore's 1st, September. Driscoll's in October. The prosecution wants you to testify. I'll be there. I figured. Also, the other victims are organizing. They want to form a support network, maybe a foundation to help service members facing similar discrimination. They asked if you'd consider being involved. Elena thought about it. A foundation meant commitment, visibility, ongoing work. It meant staying in the public eye instead of fading back into privacy. It meant continuing to stand. Tell them I'm interested. Let me get through the scholarship event first, then we'll talk. August 15th arrived hot and clear. The scholarship launch was being held at Pinehurst Academy's auditorium, the same building where Marcus had given his speech, where Elena's life had changed in ways she couldn't have imagined. She wore a simple dress, no uniform this time, just herself. Marcus wore a suit and kept fidgeting with his tie until Elena fixed it for the 4th time. You look fine. Stop messing with it. I'm nervous. Why am I nervous? I'm not even speaking. Because you care. That's allowed. Inside, the auditorium was packed. Students, faculty, community members, veterans. Sarah Ling sat in the front row with her younger brother. The 10 Navy SEALs were scattered throughout the crowd, all in civilian clothes but unmistakable in their bearing. David Cole gave Elena a subtle nod. Patricia Drummond took the stage, and the crowd quieted. Thank you all for being here tonight. We gather to launch something extraordinary, a scholarship fund that has already raised over $300,000 in less than 2 months. But more importantly, we gather to honor someone whose courage and grace transformed our community. Elena's stomach tightened. She hadn't prepared a speech, hadn't expected to need one. Patricia continued, Most of you know the story. A decorated veteran was questioned, doubted, nearly removed from her own son's graduation. What could have become a story of bitterness and anger instead became a story of dignity and strength. Elena Vasquez showed us that real power doesn't demand recognition. It simply refuses to accept disrespect. The crowd applauded. Elena kept her expression neutral, uncomfortable with the attention, but unwilling to diminish what this moment meant to others. The Elena Vasquez Scholarship will support students from underrepresented communities who are pursuing careers in service, military, medical, public service, education. Students who understand that standing up for what's right sometimes means standing alone. Students who know that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the refusal to let fear win. Patricia gestured toward Elena. Miss Vasquez, would you please join me on stage? Marcus squeezed her hand. Go get him, Mom. Elena walked to the stage on legs that felt steadier than they had in weeks. The crowd stood, applause building. She reached the podium and waited for silence. "I didn't prepare remarks," she began, "mostly because I still don't quite understand how we got here. 2 months ago, I just wanted to watch my son graduate. That's it. That was the entire plan. Sit in my assigned seat, watch him give his speech, take some photos, go home." A few quiet laughs rippled through the audience. Instead, I became part of a national conversation I never asked to join. I became a symbol for things I barely understand. And I discovered that sometimes the smallest acts of refusal can create the largest ripples of change. She looked at Marcus in the front row. "My son said something during his valedictorian speech that I want to repeat because it's the truest thing I know. Strength doesn't shout, it stands. That's all I did. I stood in a seat I'd earned. I refused to be moved for no good reason. And somehow, that simple act of standing became something bigger than me." Elena's voice grew stronger. "To the students who will receive these scholarships, you're being honored not because you're perfect, but because you're willing to stand when it would be easier to sit. Willing to speak when silence is safer. Willing to show up when showing up costs something. That's the courage that changes the world. Not grand gestures or dramatic moments, but the daily decision to remain standing when the world tells you to move." She paused, choosing her final words carefully. "I spent 16 years serving my country. I saved lives in deserts and mountains and hospital corridors. But the thing I'm most proud of isn't anything I did in uniform. It's teaching my son that belonging isn't something you ask permission for. It's something you claim, and then you stand there until everyone else understands you have every right to the space you occupy." The applause was immediate and overwhelming. Students jumped to their feet. The SEALs stood at attention. Sarah Ling was crying openly. Elena stepped back from the podium, and Patricia presented her with a framed copy of the scholarship criteria. The first recipient would be selected in the fall. The fund would continue in perpetuity, helping students who needed it most. After the ceremony, people crowded around Elena with stories and thanks. A young Latina girl told her she was joining the Navy next year because of her example. A veteran with PTSD thanked her for showing him that speaking up about discrimination wasn't weakness. A teacher said she'd started using Elena's story in her civics class to teach about civil disobedience. Each conversation was a small mirror reflecting back pieces of impact Elena hadn't known she'd created. Finally, as the crowd thinned, Raymond Bosco approached. He looked older than Elena remembered, worn down by the weight of consequence. "Miss Vasquez, I won't take much of your time. I just wanted to say congratulations. This scholarship is a beautiful thing. And I wanted you to know I've been volunteering with a civil rights organization, learning about implicit bias, trying to understand how I got to a place where I could treat someone like you the way I did." Elena studied him. "Are you doing it because you think it'll help in court, or because you actually want to change?" "Honestly, started as the first thing, became the second thing somewhere along the way. I can't undo what I did, but I can try to be someone who wouldn't do it again. That's all any of us can do. Be better than we were yesterday." He nodded, shook her hand with genuine respect, and walked away. Marcus appeared at her elbow as they watched Bosco leave. "You're too forgiving, you know that?" "Maybe. Or maybe I just understand that people are complicated and growth is possible, and holding on to anger only hurts me in the end." "When did you get so wise?" Elena laughed. "I told you." "Good teacher, yeah. Marcus bumped her shoulder. "Come on, David Cole invited us to his barbecue. Apparently all the SEALs are going. They want to toast your discharge." The barbecue lasted until midnight. Elena sat in David Cole's backyard, surrounded by warriors who'd become family, listening to their stories and laughter, watching Marcus fit seamlessly into their ranks. These men had stood for her when it mattered most. Now they were celebrating her choice to stand down, to finally choose peace over duty. Jake Morrison raised his beer. "To Captain Vasquez, the toughest medic we ever served with, and the only person brave enough to tell the Navy to shove their promotion where the sun doesn't shine. Hear, hear!" Elena raised her own beer. "To standing up, to standing down, and to knowing the difference." They drank under the stars, the Carolina night warm and full of promise. The trial testimony came in September as scheduled. Elena spent 2 days on the witness stand calmly recounting what had happened, providing evidence, dismantling the defense's attempts to paint her as oversensitive or opportunistic. Whitmore was convicted on all charges and sentenced to 6 years in federal prison. Driscoll faced court-martial in October and received a dishonorable discharge plus 4 years in military prison. Justice, when it finally came, was quiet and bureaucratic. No dramatic courtroom moments, just the steady grinding of the legal system holding people accountable for their actions. By November, Elena had joined the foundation supporting discriminated service members as an advisor. She spoke at 3 universities about civil rights and military culture. She worked with the NAACP on expanding the scholarship program. She testified before a congressional committee about systemic bias in military contracting. She built a life that mattered without requiring her to sacrifice everything. Marcus thrived at Georgetown, calling every Sunday with stories about his classes and friends and the overwhelming experience of living in Washington, D.C. He came home for Thanksgiving, taller somehow, more confident, carrying himself like someone who'd found his place in the world. They spent the holiday with the SEALs and their families, a chaotic gathering of 30 people crammed into David Cole's house. After dinner, Marcus pulled Elena aside. "I've been thinking about my major. I might switch from international relations to public policy. Focus on civil rights law. Maybe work for the ACLU or something after graduation." "What changed your mind?" "You did. Watching you turn what happened into something that helps other people. Seeing you refuse to just be a victim or a symbol, but actually do the work to make things better. I want to do that too, just in my own way." Elena pulled him into a hug. "You're going to be extraordinary. You already are." December brought snow to North Carolina, rare and beautiful. Elena spent Christmas morning in her quiet house drinking coffee and watching it fall. Her phone buzzed with messages from Marcus, from the SEALs, from students she'd spoken to, from people whose lives she'd touched in ways she was still discovering. She'd spent so much of her life moving, deployments, emergencies, rushing from one crisis to another. Now, finally, she could sit still, could watch snowfall and coffee steam, and the ordinary magic of a quiet morning. She thought about the woman who'd walked into that graduation gymnasium 2 months ago, expecting nothing more than to watch her son give a speech. That woman had no idea what was coming, had no idea how much would change in such a short time, but she'd stood her ground when it mattered, and that single act of standing had created ripples that were still spreading. Elena's phone rang. Sarah Ling. "Ms. Vasquez, I'm so sorry to bother you on Christmas, but I had to tell you, I just got my acceptance letter. Full ride to Duke social work program. They specifically mentioned the essay I wrote about how your story inspired me to pursue advocacy work." "Sarah, that's incredible. Congratulations." "It's because of you. Because you showed me that one person standing up can change everything." After they hung up, Elena sat with that truth. One person standing up. It sounded simple, almost trite, but she'd learned the hard way that simple didn't mean easy. Standing required strength. Remaining standing required courage that renewed itself every single day. The snow continued to fall. Somewhere in Georgetown, Marcus was probably sleeping in after staying up too late with friends. Somewhere in federal prison, Whitmore and Driscoll were facing the consequences of trying to silence voices they didn't want heard. Somewhere across the country, 8 other service members were rebuilding their lives after being targeted and vindicated. And here in Ashford Heights, in a small house on a quiet street, Elena Vasquez sat in her earned peace and understood finally what she'd been fighting for all along. Not recognition, not fame, not even justice, though that mattered too. She'd been fighting for the right to exist without having to constantly prove her existence was valid, for herself and for every person who'd ever been told they didn't belong in spaces they'd earned through blood and sacrifice. The doorbell rang. Elena opened it to find a delivery driver holding a massive bouquet of flowers. The card read, "From all of us at the Foundation. Thank you for teaching us that strength stands. Merry Christmas." She set the flowers on her dining room table, their colors bright against the gray winter light. Her phone buzzed again. A text from Marcus. "Merry Christmas, Mom. Love you. Thank you for teaching me that courage doesn't mean never being scared. It means being terrified and standing anyway. See you New Year's." New. Elena smiled and typed back, "Love you too. Come home safe." She returned to her window, watching the world transform under snow. The news had moved on to other stories. The viral video had faded from trending topics. Life had returned to its normal rhythms. But something fundamental had shifted. Not just in Elena's life, but in the lives of everyone the story had touched. Students who now understood they had the right to demand respect. Veterans who felt seen and valued. People who'd been carrying quiet anger for years and finally understood they weren't alone. Real power, Elena had learned, wasn't about dominating others or demanding recognition. It was about standing firm in your worth and refusing to be moved. About showing up consistently, speaking truth clearly, and trusting that eventually the people who need to see it will. She'd stood in a seat she'd earned, and that simple act had created a movement she never intended to start. The scholarship would help students for generations. The foundation would support service members facing discrimination. The legal precedents from the trials would make it harder for people like Whitmore and Driscoll to weaponize bias. The systems she'd built at Landstuhl would save lives for years to come. Her standing had mattered, not because she was special or chosen or extraordinary, but because she'd refused to accept that she was anything less than she knew herself to be. And in the end, that was the only kind of power that ever really changed anything. Elena finished her coffee as the snow deepened, coating the world in quiet white. She had nowhere to be, nothing to prove, no one to save but herself. She'd earned this peace, and she intended to stand in it for as long as it lasted. Because strength, she'd learned, doesn't always look like fighting. Sometimes it looks like finally allowing yourself to rest in the space you've claimed, and knowing, really knowing, that you belong there.